everyone. Welcome to the first extension of our Summer Bridge writing program. Today, we're going to get into some of those nitty gritty details of how you even write and format an essay. Just some things that will probably be helpful to you no matter what class you're doing the writing for. So, with no more ado, let's get into it.
So just to cover what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at some formatting and writing tips. We're going to talk about quote integration and preventing those dropped quotes. We're going to cover run-on sentences just briefly, and also kind of start talking about what does it mean to write with bias-free language and some tips and tricks for that.
So getting right into, the highlight of the entire session, the formatting stuff. So now I know this isn't very fun, but this is kind of a very important, first impressions are very important, and your formatting is kind of your professor's first impression of your paper. So it's important to get these things right. So just some basics for your typical MLA paper, unless your professor says otherwise. It should be entirely 12-point Times New Roman font. It should be double spaced and it should have 1-inch margins. Those are just good basics to live by. Of course, some of you might have professors who want something else, and in that case, do what your professor says. But if in doubt, go with this. Some other things that you are going to need are page numbers on every single page. And I know a lot of people have some difficulty making this work. So this is what you're basically going to do. Your page numbers come in 2 steps. The first part, whether you are on Word or Google Docs, you're going to go up and double click on the top inch of your page, and that will open up the header. And then you're going to just write your last name on the right-hand side, and just like that. Now, it's very tempting to just try to add the numbers this way, but you'll find that if you add, say a 1, you're just going to see page 1 on every single page, which isn't really what we want to do. So what you're going to do instead is, again, whether you're on Word or Google Docs, go to Insert, which will probably be on your top toolbar, click page numbers and put them on the top right-hand corner. Sometimes you'll have to do a little bit of backspacing to make sure it's on the same line as your name, but you can always do that and make those page numbers beautiful. These are just some kind of more visual ways of looking at it if you're like me and you want kind of a visual way. I know I have really old Word here, but regardless, even if you have updated Word, it will look similar. Your insert will be on the top bar, page numbers, and you'll just add it like that. See, I already have added my last name. And on Google Docs, insert page numbers down here, and make sure it's on the top right-hand corner and that it's on every single page. And so you've got your page number, you've got the overall formatting. How do you do the very first page of an MLA paper? These are, again, some standards. Some professors are going to want something different. And if you're doing APA or Chicago, for example, you are going to do it a little bit differently. But if you're doing MLA, this is the general rule of thumb. You're going to have a header on the top left side of just your first page. It will have your name, your professor's name. Make sure to include doctor. If they are a doctor, they worked hard for that. The name of your course and the date written so, day, month, year, all spelled out like that. And then for our title, it's really tempting to make our title big or have it be a fancy font. Nope, it's just got to be boring. Same size, same font as everything else. Now let's get to the thing that really tends to screw people up when it comes to formatting, what I call copy paste ghosts. So I'm sure most of you have been to Disneyland and been on the Haunted Mansion ride, and these guys are like the hosts, are like the hitchhiker ghosts. They come home with you, whether you like it or not. And that's what I like to think of as copy paste ghosts. So say you have a quote that you're using from an online article and it's a perfect quote, and instead of just typing it out, you just copy and paste it into your paper. which is fine, by the way, like save that time. But sometimes it will bring the formatting of the original document with it, so it will look different than the rest of your paper. For example, it's very obvious here what I copied and pasted. It's a different color, it's a different size, and a different font, and your teacher will notice this, and it will very much stick out. So what you do, just general rules of thumb, once you finish the entire paper, highlight the entire thing. Make sure it's all Times New Roman 12-point font. Make sure it's all double spaced and make sure it's all black. I always do this. It's the last step I do before I turn it in. It just, helps you get rid of some of those ghosts.
All right, so that was great. We got our formatting. It's really good to kind of make these templates with all that or get going, these check marks. So now as you're getting into writing, we start to have to quote information or provide information from sources. And so it's really important that we use proper quote integration. If we just drop a quote in there and we don't anchor them, this is what's considered a dropped quote. And it's for professors, this feels like you're just throwing them off a cliff. So here's how we want to avoid drop quotes. We always want to anchor them, right? So this first example is when you leave someone hanging. So for example, if you're writing, as education is about more than going to school, period. Quote, school provides a place for people to find themselves and discover who they are. End quote, citation. So there we have like an introductory sentence, but then we just do period and then just stick our quote in. And so it's not holding on to anything. It doesn't have a place to hang on to, and it's just hanging out. So there's several ways we can remedy this or correct it. We just want to make sure it's connected to something and it flows in your writing. So one option is same starting sentence, right? Education is about more than going to school. Then we can bring in the author or the source kind of as an introductory phrase before the quote. So Robinson argues that school provides a place for people to find themselves and discover who they are. So there I just took the author's name. I said that this is what they're arguing. I gave my quote and then I end my citation. Another option would be education is about more than going to school, period. For many people, comma, and then I give my quote and then my citation. So it doesn't have to have the author or the source in it if you've already kind of established who that author is. It can just have something that connects the reader to what the quote's saying. So sometimes it's easy if we think about some almost like quick sentence templates to follow with quote integration. So of course, before in our summer bridge, we talked about topic sentence, transitioning context, evidence analysis, and we need all of that. But when we're plugging our evidence in here, we want to kind of have some go-to ideas for how to make it hang on to something or anchor. So one option is kind of like that first remedy we had, right? Where we can introduce the source, we can say who the author is, and then we can kind of have that like, so that's our little introductory phase, comma, author's last name, again, argues, explains, states, and then the quote and our page number at the end of our citation. So this is like really good practice the first time you're introducing a source because it kind of gives credibility to the source. So for the first example, this would be in Why Education Matters by Tia Robinson. Robinson explains how, and then whatever the quote is. Another option is to have that dependent clause, or again, that kind of little phrase, and then information that's needed to understand the quote and then give the quote. So an example of this could be, despite an attempt for community college to be barrier-free, comma, Robinson suggests, and then whatever we wanted to say. So that we're kind of like giving an alternative or some sort of like switching gears. A third option is maybe we've already kind of established a lot of our sources and we're really getting into the evidence. Here we can just give some information that we've added or summarized or something important, and then our quotations. So education is rapidly evolving as teachers must, quote, become more aware of the diversity that exists in the classroom. And then we give our citation. So that would be our parenthetical citation before we end the sentence. And another quick example would be just that flat out, whoever the person is, states, explores, explains, argues, elaborates, whatever that word is, and then we give the quote. So Joan states, and then whatever the quote is. So these are not the only way to kind of create quote integration, but these are some good ways to start thinking about it if this feels new to you, or maybe you struggle with varying kind of different ways to bring a quote in. So we are going to do a virtual practice here, right? So I've given you guys an author, I've made up some information, so please don't ever cite this in a real academic article or a real academic paper. And I've given you a fake page number. So here I would love for you to take a few minutes to write at least 2 sentences. One of them must include a quote. So think about if you were using this for some sort of paper, how could you write something and then give a quote that flows with the information? So this would be a great time for you to pause this video real quick, practice, and then resume.
All right, so assuming you did that, good job. I love your 2 sentences. They are the best I've ever seen. And now let's keep going. So run-on sentences, the dreaded note that your teacher leaves in red on your paper. What even is a run-on sentence? So here is a quick definition. A run-on sentence occurs when 2 complete sentences, independent clauses, run into each other without punctuation or a linking word. I got this definition from Jazzy, actually, one of her wonderful handouts, which I believe is in the booklet we gave you during our summer bridge. So if you want some more information on that, definitely go look at it. Basically, a run-on is you're just taking 2 sentences that could stand on their own and you're squishing them together with either nothing in between them or sometimes just a comma. A comma is not quite enough glue though, so we need a little bit more than that. So how do you determine what the hell a sentence is? Very basically, a sentence has 2 things. It has a subject or, a person, place, thing, idea, and what the subject is doing, a verb, basically. So in this case, we have our run-on sentence. Television is dangerous to people's health. It causes people to become inactive. Okay, that's a run-on. So now we got to determine where the split between the 2 sentences is before we can fix it. One of my favorite ways is actually just read it really fast, like only pause when there are periods or commas. That usually can help you figure it out. But if you need a little bit more help, figure out what the subjects are and the verbs are. So the subject of this first part is in blue, it's television. And that is what the sentence is about. And is the verb, it's what it's doing in this case. And then we would find our second subject, it. Right? It stands in for television, and it is what the second part is about. And it is causing people to become inactive. That's what it's doing. So that is our space between these 2 sentences, and that is where we need to focus. So how do we fix this then? Now, there are a lot more ways to fix on a run-on than this. These are just 2 basic examples. The easiest, just stick a period between them, make them 2 full sentences. That is a perfect way to do this, and you can always do that. Another example, if you want maybe to connect these 2 sentences, is to use a connecting word, or, and, but, because all these types of words are very good because you can put them in there and show the connection between the 2 sentences. Now, obviously, which word you choose is going to be up to your discretion. Some will work better than others in different cases, but these are some good examples. So now here is some practice. I'm going to have you again pause the video and try to take a look at these sentences and see if you can address, 1, what the 2 sentences are in this case, and 2, how you might fix them, knowing that there are numerous ways to fix each of these sentences. There is no one correct answer. So pause that video and try to do those. All right, coming back. I love how you fixed those sentences. It's looking really good. Let's keep going.
So this is just a quick introduction into bias-free language. And I want to kind of have a disclaimer. Bias-free language is continually evolving, as all language is, right? And it's also very dependent on the source you're looking at. So MLA may have different rules or guidelines than APA, which have maybe different rules or guidelines in social context or conversational writing. So we really want to be mindful. And all I want you guys to take away from this is that when you write, think about people. Think about what's the best way to describe people, what could be maybe offensive or harmful to someone. And if you can, we want the person to be the center of the description, not some sort of label. And so this really comes into play when we're talking about things like age, race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. So I'm just going to give you guys some quick tips, some common things that I see in writing. Again, for each one of these that I say, oh, don't do this and do this, there's always a difference of opinion across the board. So this is kind of going off of the citation manuals that I've seen. And again, those are always changing and evolving. And also, we also want to come back to what the person prefers. So in academic writing, we can follow all these rules. But if someone's from a community or from one of these and they have a preference, we never want to disregard their preference or their label or identity for themselves in terms of like, oh no, but this is what the book said. So it's kind of that shade of gray writing where we're really considering how people feel. So for gender, the biggest one is we often write in this binary, or even what I just said. So like, hey guys, like not necessarily the best thing to say, right? It would have been better to say like, hey everyone, hey folks, hey y'all. So in gender too, we don't want to have like she, he, or ladies and gentlemen, men and women, these general statements where we create this gender binary of only men and women. We do want to say things like people, individuals. If we're not sure how someone identifies, we want to use they. APA especially has moved towards the default of using they in sentences and even in the singular tense. So we wouldn't say like, oh, she or slash he because we think it's a singular tense, and then something would just say they need to turn in the essay, right? So they can be used in singular terms. So the biggest thing is be mindful. There's more than two genders. It's not a binary world. So don't clump people into she slash she, ladies, gentlemen, all of that. With sexual orientation, again, this is very specific to how people identify and always respecting that, but we never want to lump people like saying, oh, the gays, or even certain terms like saying straight, because that assumes like that is some sort of contextual benefit of straight, and it's really a social term more than a technical term for writing. So we kind of want to switch things over to what are we saying by straight? Oh, we're saying heterosexual. And on the flip, a lot of people now avoid the term homosexual in writing because it's considered outdated and offensive. So what do we want to say? LGBTQ plus community. Are we talking about a specific group? Then we want to be as specific as possible. If we're talking about gay men or any other kind of classification, and that's all we're talking about, we don't need to make a bigger group out of it. So just stay kind of to either LGBTQ community, specific labels off of what you're writing, and avoid things that kind of categorize people in ways that aren't equitable. So for race, there's also a lot of debate, a lot of talks about what's the right thing to say, what's not the right thing to say. So here's the biggest kind of takeaways. African American can't be used as a general umbrella term because that indicates a certain type of history or a certain type of ethnic relation. Whereas Black can be used more as an umbrella term because if we're talking about all individuals who are Black, that's different than all individuals who are African American. With Black, if we're using it as a term to describe people and not just a color, we always want to capitalize it. And that goes with white as well if we're using it to describe people. This is slightly debated. I will say that there's some people who prefer to have white lowercase. But in APA, the latest edition, white is capitalized with Black. We also want to move again away from those like binary identifications. So instead of Latino, Latina, Latinx is the most inclusive term to use. And in general, if we aren't sure, we can also kind of talk about, depending on who we're talking about, maybe saying like people of color instead of saying minorities, because again, that's not necessarily the proper context. So moving right along to age, this one, the goal is to be as specific as possible. Who are you talking about? And then also avoiding terms that might be offensive, like the elderly, the aging, seniors, right? Instead, okay, who am I talking about? People over 65, adolescents aged 13 to 17, children under 12, older individuals, older people, the older population. Those are kind of more preferred terms. With disability, again, going off of what that person claims is most important, but we want to kind of focus on that people first perspective. So instead of saying autistic person, a person with autism puts the person first and not what we would categorize as a disability. Same thing, we could say people with intellectual disabilities or a person with paraplegia instead of a paraplegic. Again, though, this is kind of debated among the individual and how they claim their identity. The goal is to also just never include a label that's not relevant to the information. Don't add labels to people if it's not important to your argument. So leave those labels out. And that is all for our first presentation.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening in. Hopefully we will do another one of these and we'll get to see you guys in person. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. We're going to try to set something up so we can talk to you guys a little bit more. And I hope you all are having a good semester and the best of luck to you. Bye.